It is early on in the 4th of November, 1979, and an angry mob of religiously and ideologically motivated Iranian students stormed the American embassy in Tehran. They capture more than 60 Americans in the embassy and demand the return of the overthrown Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, now seeking medical treatment in America, to Iran for trial, and starting the Iranian hostage crisis. Amid the chaos, some lucky American diplomats and staff members managed to flee the scene from the embassy's back complex. It is their struggle that was famously reflected in Ben Affleck's 2012 movie Argo. But does the movie show the full story? This is the historiographer, and today the true story of these 6 American diplomats' escape from a nation engulfed in a zealous revolution will be explored. On the 16th of January 1979, facing an uncontrollable situation in Iranian streets, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, left his shahdom at the hands of a transitional government led by Prime Minister Shapur Bakhtiar to seek sanctuary in Egypt. In early February of that year, Khomeini returned to Iran from France after 15 years in exile amid a thunderous wave of cheering crowds comprised of millions of hopeful Iranians. In defiance to Bakhtiar, Khomeini appointed his own prime minister, Mehdi Bazargan, leading to violent clashes and the eventual collapse of Bakhtiar's provisional government in mid-February. With Iran under his religious robe via a puppeted prime minister, Khomeini sought to not only preserve the revolution, but also to spread it. This included the banning of anti-Khomeini criticisms, arbitrary arrests of pro-Shah, left-wing, or even neutral elements, crushing the ethnic uprisings, the bolstering of pro-revolution groups ranging from student associations to literal armed groups like the Revolutionary Guard, and the denouncing of Western influence. With the spring of 1979 and fearing a possible attack on the American embassy, Carter's administration massively reduced the staffing of the American embassy in Tehran, appointing only seasoned diplomats and quote-unquote diplomats with a taste of adventure. The already tense situation lit up when US President Jimmy Carter faced a dilemma on whether or not should he accept to admit the sickly Shah into the US for cancer treatment, famously saying to his foreign policy advisors, "What the hell are you guys gonna do if they take our people hostage over there?" Nevertheless, the Shah was reluctantly admitted into the US on the 22nd of October 1979. With the wounds of American intervention still fresh in Iranian minds due to America's nefarious role in the anti-democratically elected Mossadegh 1953 coup, this decision led to an outrage in Iran, as many feared that America and Western powers might reinstate the Shah as they did nearly 3 decades earlier. It is here that we must take a step back and highlight this diplomatic blunder. Indeed, it can be said with certainty that Carter's admission of the Shah into the US was the spark that started an uncontrollable fire, a fire that eventually engulfed Jimmy Carter's presidency. This was because the US administration severely underestimated the possible backlash of their decision due to the aforementioned hate of US interventionism in Iran. Anger was dangerously brewing in Iranian society after said decision, especially after Khomeini's fiery comments that described Carter's decision as evidence of American plotting. In the following weeks, an American diplomat and hostage even described the situation as the calm before the storm, saying that the Iranians, be it students or Khomeini's regime, were up to something between the 22nd of October and the eventual storming of the embassy nearly 3 weeks later. And what a storm it was! Certainly, on the morning of 4 November 1979, orchestrated by the newly formed Muslim student followers of the Imam's line, young Iranians began to demonstrate around the embassy. Sometime later, the American embassy was stormed, and 66 Americans were taken hostage. Crucially, amidst the chaos, 2 groups of Americans managed to escape, as they were working in a different building in the embassy compound, of which one group is the subject of this video. While the first group, led by American Consul Moorfield, failed to escape as they were captured by revolutionaries, the second group, led by senior consular officer Robert Anders, successfully managed to sneak from the embassy's back complex and took a direct route to the British embassy. The Anders group included 5 people, Bob Robert Anders, the young married couples Mark and Cora Lijek, as well as Joseph and Kathleen Stafford, all either consular officers or assistants. However, as the Anders group neared the British embassy, their path was unluckily blocked by an anti-Western protest in front of said embassy. As a result, Robert Anders invited the others to his home as he lived nearby. Realizing they could not stay in a compromised place for long, the 5 Americans consistently changed places over the course of the next 3 days, going from house to house with the hopes of a quick resolution to the issue. However, after Prime Minister Mehdi Bazargan, appointed by Khomeini as mentioned previously, resigned in protest of Khomeini's support to the storming of the embassy, the future looked bleak for the 5 diplomats. Looking for options, Anders made one decision that potentially saved the lives of his team. The decision was contacting a man by the name of John Sheardown, the top Canadian immigration officer in Tehran, and asking to seek refuge. John Sheardown responded enthusiastically by lambasting Anders for not having contacted him previously and saying, "Hell yes, count on us." Consequently, and after 6 days jumping from house to house, the Anders group arrived at the Sheardown residence on the 10th of November, 1979. Upon arrival, not only were the 5 Americans warmly greeted by John and his wife Zina Sheardown, but they also met, for the first time, with arguably the hero of the story, Ambassador Ken Taylor. To maintain secrecy, the group of 5 was split in half, as the Staffords were taken by Taylor to his home and greeted by his wife Patricia, while the other kept staying with the Sheardowns. The 6 were sheltered by the 2 Canadian households for the upcoming total of 79 days. The group was joined by another lucky American, the agricultural attaché Henry Lee Schatz, who managed to seek refuge in the Swedish embassy after the storming of the American embassy. On November 27, that is, after nearly 2 months of sheltering the Americans, Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor received a call from the Swedish embassy asking him to take in Lee Schatz, who was subsequently placed with the Sheardowns. Behind the scenes, and in a flurry of diplomatic activity, Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor was frantically making contacts with Flora MacDonald, the Canadian External Affairs Minister, to seek help in smuggling these 6 Americans out of Iran. Flora MacDonald did not waste time and contacted the then young Canadian Prime Minister Joe Clark as well as the CIA for assistance. Responding to Ottawa's pleas, on the 2nd of January 1980, the CIA sent Tony Mendez to Ottawa to help plan the exfiltration of the 6 escapees from Iran. While both the Canadians and the Americans were scratching their heads and exploring their options, such as disguising the Americans as petroleum engineers and shipping them on an oil tanker across the Hormuz Straits, it soon became clear that the safest option was passing through Tehran's airport. But how? How can 6 Americans pass through Tehran's Mehrabad heavily guarded airport undetected without raising the Revolutionary Guard's eyebrows? Enter Tony Mendez with his genius idea of Argo, where these 6 Americans would be assigned the identities of Canadian filmmakers working in Hollywood who innocently came to Iran to scout for a Middle Eastern themed location for their movie titled Argo, thereby easily justifying their presence in Iran amidst the turmoil. In a masterful cover-up, Tony Mendez recruited John Chambers and Robert Seidel, both seasoned Hollywood makeup artists, to establish a functioning office named Studio 6 Productions, where the name was inspired by the 6 diplomats. With Robert Seidel posing as film producer, Mendez even placed Robert Seidel's wife in the office to monitor the telephone 24/7, just in case officials in Tehran called to verify the studio's validity. Furthermore, the upcoming movie Argo was advertised in Hollywoodian magazines. A film party at a nightclub in Los Angeles was also held to promote the movie, therefore ensuring that the cover for the 6 quote-unquote movie-producing Canadians was solid enough. The CIA agent also worked hand-in-hand with the Canadian government staff in Ottawa, where Canada's Parliament agreed on granting the 6 Americans Canadian passports in a secret special meeting. In the cold early weeks of January 1980, Tony Mendez, Flora MacDonald, and Ambassador Ken Taylor meticulously planned every detail with dozens of coded messages sent to the Canadian Embassy in Tehran, where Canadian passports, credit cards, personal IDs, and other supporting material were sent to the Canadian Embassy through a Canadian diplomatic courier. However, all the meticulous planning involved in the operation was nearly blown by Canadian journalist Jean Peltier, working for the Quebecan La Presse newspapers. Jean Peltier was interested in the Iranian hostage crisis since day one. Noticing discrepancies between the number of Americans that US officials were referring to, Peltier began nosing in on the matter. He thus began to ask numerous Canadian and US officials for clues. Alarmed by the recurring meetings between closed doors in the Canadian Parliament, Peltier began putting the pieces together, where he logically assumed that the American escapees were harbored by Canada. He subsequently approached the embassy for confirmation of his guesswork, thus revealing to Canadian authorities that the secret was out and that the cover was blown. Luckily, Peltier decided not to publish his findings, as he feared for the security of all the people involved. On the 19th of January, Ambassador Ken Taylor's wife, Patricia, was horrified after receiving an anonymous call asking to speak to one of the staffers. To this day, no one knows exactly who called, although it was most likely Iranian intelligence working on finding these 6 Americans. With each passing day, it was immediately clear that further delay would only endanger the lives of everybody involved. Thus, with all preparations having been made, on the 25th of January 1980, just 2 days before the expected departure date, Mendez flew to Tehran with another skilled CIA agent by the name of Ed Johnson to assist with the rescue, both posing as crew members for the movie Argo. In Tehran, he met with Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor and the American escapees, each of whom was assigned an entire personality to memorize, ranging from their new names to their new birth dates as Canadian citizens, a fact that incredibly stressed these 6, pushing them to their limit. Another grave issue soon became apparent with a mistake on the dates of the forged entry visas. However, using their forging skills, both Ed Johnson and Mendez managed to correct the mistake. After booking a flight on Swissair Flight 363 for Zurich in Switzerland, and after obtaining a coded message from Ottawa that read, "See you later, Exfiltrator," all final preparations were complete to head to Tehran's Mehrabad International Airport. The Canadian embassy was to be closed the same day, with all sensitive documents to be burned, discarded, and all personnel to be evacuated. In the early morning of Sunday, the 27th of January 1980, the crew departed aboard Canadian diplomatic vehicles to the airport. Before they were able to board their flight, they had to pass through immigration. Mendez went first, where the immigration official in charge took a look at his documents, and then, without any apparent reason, went inside his office. This was not a good sign for the Exfiltrators, who suspected that their cover had been blown. After some time, the immigration official came back and approved the rest of the crew's documents. As it turned out, said official went to take a tea break, where the 8 breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, after making it through security and anticipating to board Swissair Flight 363, the Americans were met with a grim prospect. Their flight was indefinitely delayed due to mechanical problems on the airplane. What to do now? Should another flight be booked? After much deliberation, the crew finally agreed that waiting was the best and safest option. After a painstakingly slow hour, mechanical difficulties were resolved on the flight. The 8 Americans then safely entered the flight. Exiting Iranian airspace, the crew celebrated the success of the mission after being imprisoned for more than 3 months. Upon landing in Zurich, the 6 diplomats were taken by CIA operatives. The next day, and after making sure that these 6 left Iran, Jean Peltier released the story of the escape of these 6 Americans orchestrated by Canada. Realizing the Argo story was blown, these 6 diplomats were flown back to the US, where they arrived to a hero's welcome. Never before has pro-Canadian sentiments echoed this much in the US, where Ambassador Ken Taylor was made a superstar in America. His face was printed all over US magazines, and signs of "Thank you Canada" were seen all over the States. In conclusion, there are discrepancies between the movie Argo and what happened on the ground. However, not all is negative, as the movie still sparked people's interest in a year that is described as the most important year in the latter half of the 20th century, 1979. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to the channel to spread history. This has been the Historiographer, and for now, see you in the next video.